When Europe was in the midst of the Dark Ages, the universities of Timbuktu and ancient Mali were beacons of learning for the entire world. Our discoveries in architecture, science, astronomy, and art made a global influence, a clear reflection of Black people's deep and abiding love to educate. Despite slavery ripping us from our loved ones and outlawing learning in a foreign land, we never once forgot our rightful heritage as learners. We still developed a secret language to communicate and shared messages called Tut. We maintained the cadence and rhythms of our West African native tongues by passing down the dialect of African American vernacular English and music and artistic styles. We defied our enslavers and risked death, meeting in small groups to teach each other not only how to read, but also science and astronomy, the patterns of the stars in the skies, herbs, and medicine. With the end of slavery, pursuing a formal education was a top priority for free Blacks who created formal educational institutions for us, which we identify today as historical Black colleges and universities.
All of you leaving here have the potential for enormous success. There's a price that comes with that.
By the turn of the 20th century, while America had a major upheaval in race relations that led to some progress, remnants of clear racism in academia were prevalent in everything from grade school curriculum and specialized testing to a lack of resources and access for our teachers.
I go to a school where I have a lack of resources. I go to a school in a shared building with 3 other schools. I go to a school that has only 3 Black teachers. My school has no auditorium. That's unacceptable.
My name is Heather Clark. I am an adjunct professor in early childhood development. As an educator, I support Black families for this very reason, because if we know more, we can advocate for more. Now let's get started. First off, it's really important to know if your child is in a public school, charter school, or parochial school. If your child is in a public school, then they absolutely must provide accommodations to your child. Second of all, does your child have an IEP, which is an individual education plan? If your child has an IEP, then they, again, must provide the accommodations that are on your child's IEP, because this is a federal document that details the mandated services that they are supposed to provide for your child's disability. If your child does not have an IEP, then you have every right to request and demand an evaluation based on your child's disability so that they can provide the services so that your child can access their education, their appropriate education, so that they can thrive in public school. I would document everything that's happening in school in writing, every interaction, and then write a letter to the school-based support team, that is the SBST, requesting that they do the evaluation as soon as possible and start the IEP process. I actually like the sandwich approach to communicating with parents because I believe that all communications with parents should start with a positive commentary and not deficit-based language when we're talking about our children and students. So I think that it's a great thing that the students has positive things to say about your child and then talks about their concerns and then goes again into the positive things that your child's doing. We want to always be talking about the positive things that our children are doing in the classroom and not just be focusing on the negative things. And remember that our children are always doing great things, even though they might have some things that they need to work on, and always bring it back to those positive things. So the sandwich approach is what I often recommend that my student teachers do. So whenever they interact with their parents, that they always start off on a positive. So start with the glows first, as we call it in education, and then the grows, and then go back to the glows, which is the sandwich-based approach. In my own experience as an educator and also as a developmental professional that works with children, we know that holding children back and also having children skip a grade is not best developmental practice, because there is a disconnect between children's developmental level, what they're doing in their age group, and what children are learning academically. So I would really push back on that in your meeting with the teacher. I would also urge you to have someone go into the meeting with you so that you have an advocate, even if it's not a paid advocate, at your side to help you document everything that's going on in the meeting. Again, I would also say to write every communication down with the teacher and have all of your students, your child's work samples. My other suggestion would be to request an evaluation for your child, because if your child has a special need, a disability, for example, then holding your child back is not going to help them. What they need is special education services, which if they're held back a grade and they're learning in the same manner, holding them back is not going to help them because they're still being taught by the same type of pedagogy, as opposed to a pedagogy that's based on helping students who have disabilities. So an evaluation really is what needs to be considered in this case. Do they need help specifically with math? Do they need help with reading? Do they have difficulties with their fine motor skills, holding on to a pencil, for example? It's really not a question of the child needs to be held back because they're not making their milestones, but what can the teacher do and the school do to help the child meet their milestones? First of all, I would like to tell you, recommend that you take a deep breath and take a moment to reset your expectations and to just sit with that for a bit, because that's a lot of news, and that's a huge thing, and it takes a lot to get that diagnosis, and that's a lot of work on your part, and that's a huge step. So now that you have that diagnosis, this is great actually, because now you understand that your child is neurodiverse, and you have to understand that your child does not need to be fixed, but you're going to the next step to figure out what barriers need to be removed and what things that you can do to help your child thrive. So one of the first things I would like to recommend is searching out resources from people in the autistic community and people who are actually autistic to see what they recommend that are helping them thrive and show up in their full humanity. And then I would suggest sitting down with wherever your child attends school, daycare, their social activities, and making sure that your child is supported in all of those ways in their neurodiversity, so that they can thrive. When you're meeting with their therapists, make sure that you are all aligned and on the same page. You have every right to say, you know what, I don't feel well with this therapist, I don't want to work with this therapist, and never feel badly about that. That's your child, and that's your child's rights and their humanity. It's a long process. You're not trying to cure your child. It's a marathon and not a sprint. You'll have ups and downs, but you will get there, and your child will be able to thrive if you support them in their full humanity as an autistic individual. So Montessori schools it's a type of pedagogy, basically, and it came out of Maria Montessori's approach to education in the 19th century. And it's an inquiry, play-based type of teaching where the educator is more of a guide and the learners are more self-directed. We see these very prevalent in nursery schools, preschools, and some daycares. We don't see them as prevalent in elementary schools, definitely not in middle schools or high schools, unfortunately. We know from children's development and from education that all children thrive in a play-based learning. Piaget, another big pedagogy specialist and child developmental specialist, said Play is the work of childhood. Children learn through play. Children learn through inquiry. So yes, Black children definitely thrive in this type of program. Unfortunately, traditional schools tend to be very authoritative and very top-down approach, teacher-directed. There are public schools that are very Montessori inspired, and also Reggio Emilia approach, that's another approach that's like Montessori, that's also very play-based, inquiry-based, and you do see them in public preschools. Unfortunately, once you get to elementary school, you see them less. So my advice is, as parents, to always be pushing back once your children get to public school and get to elementary school, because even when we get to even private elementary schools, we see them less, and to constantly be pushing back and advocating for more play, less busy work, and more inquiry-based, project-based learning. Unfortunately, I experienced something very similar myself as a child. And my immediate advice to you is to elevate that directly as a parent to the teacher and to the school at large. First of all, that is unacceptable for that to happen to that little girl. We have an issue of lack of cultural awareness for that girl's hair. We have an issue of lack of consent because she was touched without her permission, and an issue of body autonomy. And the teacher didn't take her concerns into account. We have so many things going on there, and the only thing possible is to elevate that to the teacher and to the school administration at large. The school needs to do better, and the teacher and the school needs to apologize, and this is a teachable moment for the school. There needs to be a discussion about the cultural awareness of not touching Black children's hair. There needs to be a discussion about body autonomy and consent. We don't touch anyone without their permission. We don't touch hair. We don't touch individuals. And that is exactly what I would recommend that you do, and do not feel guilty about it. And the teacher needs to acknowledge the fact that she didn't or he didn't make the child feel safe. I really hope that this works out for you and for the child.